Thank you. I really appreciate everyone coming here today. I hope that this is turns out to be a productive session for you. As Tobias mentioned, I'll be talking about best practices for DDoS mitigation on AWS. During this session, I want to kind of cover three key things. The first is to talk to you a little bit about some of the key trends that we're seeing in terms of DDoS threats, how they're changing and growing over time. The second is to take you through what we consider 10 of the best practices that customers can use on AWS for DDoS resiliency. And then we'll take about 10 minutes to go through a demo that shows an example of how easy it is to integrate AWS Shield with other services like PagerDuty and Slack and be able to enable notifications for DDoS events. So as we're all aware, DDoS attacks are growing in size over time. And over the last several years, they're showing an almost exponential type of increase. A typical pattern is that in any given year, some new vector may appear. So in 2016, we saw the Mirai botnet. So this was exploitation of Internet of Things devices, routers, so forth, that were compromised and used to create a very large botnet and launch large attacks. And in 2016, those largest attacks were ranging on the 500 to 600 gigabit per second range. More recently, you've likely heard of the attacks that exploit reflection off of Memcached servers. And the industry has seen attacks exceeding 1 terabit per second as a result of those. And again, this is kind of this typical pattern where about once every year there's some new large vector that appears, it gets exploited at scale, and we see sort of a new benchmark in terms of the largest attacks that can affect customers. AWS sees these attacks just as other companies such as, other companies that have talked about these publicly. We don't typically speak publicly about the attacks that we see, but we focus on doing a very good job of protecting our customers. The graph that you see here is a snapshot from the Global Threat Environment Dashboard, which is something that customers of Shield Advanced have access to. And this just shows a sample over a 2-week period. And what the display here is a little bit small, but I think a couple of the important things to call out were that during this 2-week period, we detected over 67,000 attacks against AWS resources. In this particular 2-week sample, the largest attack exceeded 700 gigabits per second in size. So again, just emphasizing that we do see a very large number of attacks against AWS resources and our customers. We focus very strongly on protecting our customers, and we'll talk a little bit, though, about what you can do as part of that sort of shared security availability model to make sure that you are resilient to DDoS attacks. DDoS attacks can come in a number of different flavors across different parts of the network stack. So down at the data link or physical level, that's where we're really focused at AWS. We protect you from that. You don't need to worry about that level. But as we move up the stack, you have network attacks and transport attacks. These can be things like at the network layer, the ping of death, et cetera. The transport layer, you start seeing some of the more typical flood attacks, so SYN or ACK floods. This is where reflection attacks would come to play. And then as you move further up the stack, you get into application attacks, so things like HTTP floods or SQL injection. It's also the area where bots and scrapers and things come into play. And so again, these attacks can occur at multiple layers, and that's why it's important to have protection across multiple layers. I'll also mention that after these talks, we'll be sharing these slides. Don't feel like you necessarily, it's fine if you want to take pictures of them, but don't feel like you need to do that. We'll share these out and you'll get complete copies. So, why is DDoS a problem? There's maybe three main areas where it creates challenges. The first is that a DDoS attack can affect the availability of your application. And sometimes these attacks they don't last just minutes, they can last hours or days. The second is that there can be financial impact from attacks. And these can be things like lost revenue. If your site is down, you can't take orders or subscriptions or whatever your revenue model is. You also can face increased infrastructure expense because in order to mitigate the attack, you may choose to scale up your resources. And so even though you stay available, it winds up costing you money. Sometimes attackers seek to extort payment. So they'll send a notice that says, pay us in Bitcoin by a certain date or you will be attacked. So you can be subject to extortion. You can also take a reputation hit. So a lot of times this is correlated with availability. So if your site goes down, you can be in a position where your customers essentially decide they want to go somewhere else, or they just feel like, hey, you're not reliable, and so your reputation, again, takes damage. And then lastly, particularly when you get up into the application type attacks, you run some risk of data loss. This is particularly acute either in cases of things like SQL injection, where someone might do damage to your database or extract data from it. Also, there are the scrapers that may come and steal content from your application or your site. So again, all of these are things, areas where DDoS can create challenges. Now, when it comes to actually saying, I want to mitigate one of these attacks, there are some challenges there as well. First of all, in many cases, particularly for network attacks, the mitigations require bandwidth, and it can require a lot of it. Again, attacks are peaking in the hundreds of gigabits per second up to terabits per second. Scaling can be, again, very expensive, particularly if you're the one who's having to scale your own resources to mitigate an attack. And also the anomaly detection is kind of it's challenging and it's frequently changing. So if you're trying to swing mitigations in only when an attack occurs, you of course have to first detect that attack in order to start blocking it. And any gap in time or any misses can lead to availability impact. And lastly, DDoS expertise tends to be in short supply. Essentially, you want to focus on building your business, on doing things that are beneficial to your customers. And the less that you need to worry about building deep in-house DDoS expertise, the better. So to help customers with this, about a year and a half ago, AWS announced AWS Shield. Shield is available in two levels. The first is what we call Shield Standard. And Shield Standard is something that's available to all AWS customers at no additional charge. Just by using AWS, you receive the benefits of Shield Standard. And really what those include are just comprehensive protections against network DDoS attacks. And we'll drill into that a little bit more in the next slide. Shield Advanced is a paid service. And as a paid service, it provides both additional protections, but also a number of benefits. So we'll look at Shield Standard in a little more depth first. Again, it's focused on layer 3-4 protection for all customers of AWS. It provides automatic defense against the most common network attacks. And these protections are available for any AWS resource across all regions. And again, as a customer, there's nothing that you need to do to enable these protections. And examples of these sorts of attacks that you're protected against include SYN floods, UDP floods, reflection attacks, et cetera. And again, it doesn't matter if you're using CloudFront or Route 53 or regional services, whatever you're using, you receive this basic level of DDoS protection. And for many AWS customers, this is all that they ever need. Now, if you are concerned about application layer attacks, you have the option of subscribing to AWS Waffe. And AWS Waffe will provide those layer 7 protections, and they're available on just a pay-as-you-go self-service model. Shield Advanced adds to the protections of Shield Standard and provides a number of benefits. So the first is that with Shield Advanced, we do some additional detection and monitoring. In particular, we look at the network flows and other data streams and essentially parse those more at a customer level. So the anomaly detection is a little more granular, and that enables us to do some things like provide visibility to the individual Shield Advanced customers that we don't with Shield Standard. The next is that it offers enhanced protections against those very largest DDoS attacks. And this tends to be particularly important for customers who aren't able to run on CloudFront, our CDN service. If they're only able to run out of a region, sometimes these additional protections are particularly valuable because of the fact that in a region, the network transport tends to be a little more constrained. And so we sometimes have to get a little more creative if you're only able to run out of a single region in order to really protect availability. Shield Advanced also gives visibility into DDoS attacks. With Shield Standard, you're protected. You generally don't need to worry about DDoS, but there are many cases where customers say, even if I was not impacted by a DDoS event, I want to have awareness of it. I want to know that there are people who are bad actors who are attacking my application and trying to impact my availability. And so again, with Shield Advanced, you get this visibility. You get metrics in the console, ability to create CloudWatch metrics, set alarms on them, all of those types of benefits. Because really, full DDoS protection requires protection across all layers of the network stack, Shield Advanced also includes AWS Waffe at no additional charge. So if you have subscribed to Shield Advanced and you have protected a particular resource, say an application load balancer, you can then enable AWS Waffe and put what we call a web ACL on that application load balancer and protect it from layer 7 attacks at no additional charge. Many customers find they get the greatest value from Shield Advanced through access to our DDoS response team. This is a team that's available 24/7 of DDoS experts. All they do every day is to mitigate attacks, monitor for and mitigate attacks against Amazon.com, AWS, and AWS customers of Shield Advanced. So, and they can engage with you both proactively, so they can work with you to validate your DDoS architecture, your resiliency. They can work with you before an attack occurs to set up alarms and notifications. And then also during an event, you can reach out and contact them, and they can help you with things like if you have an application layer attack and you've enabled WAF on a resource, they can look and help you identify an attack signature and put an appropriate rule in place to block that event. And then lastly, Shield Advanced gives you cost protections. And so with this, sometimes the right thing to do for mitigating a DDoS attack is simply to scale resources to absorb the traffic. And without Shield Advanced, if you choose to do that on AWS, you would normally pay for that increased usage. With Shield Advanced, we're able to say, hey, if your bill is spiking as a result of a DDoS event, we can essentially erase that spike off your bill so that all you pay for is the normal sort of baseline traffic that you would have expected during that time period. So with that, let's jump into these 10 best practices that we advocate for DDoS resiliency. And this comes back to, these are many things that you can do as a customer on AWS, regardless of whether you are subscribed to Shield Advanced or not. So I think this is something that you'll find of value, again, regardless of whether you feel like you need that additional level of protection. So first, let's look at just a very basic web application that someone might set up on AWS. In this case, it's a number of EC2 application servers fronted by an elastic load balancer that has an elastic IP address and is exposed to the internet. Clearly, there's probably more that we can do here to make this application DDoS resilient. And in fact, really what our goal is to build a highly scalable, secure, well-monitored, DDoS-protected application. If we do all of these things, we're going to get the maximum DDoS resiliency. And so we'll focus first on building an application that's highly scalable. So the first best practice that we recommend is that if you are able to, if you're running a TCP-based application, like an HTTP application on AWS, we strongly suggest that you use globally distributed services like CloudFront and Route 53. And the reason for this is that, first of all, these services have built into them comprehensive protections against layer 3 and 4 DDoS attacks. And they also have a huge ability to scale and absorb large volumes of traffic. And that comes from the fact that these services are delivered through over 114 edge locations worldwide. So it's a very broad surface across which AWS can ingest both user traffic but also DDoS traffic. And at every one of those 114 edge network locations, we have inline DDoS protection built in. And so we see that over 99.9% of attacks that come in against CloudFront and Route 53 are mitigated automatically in under a minute with no operator involvement. So that comes back to the slide I was showing earlier where we saw 67,000 plus attacks over a 2-week period. Our DDoS operators probably got engaged for only a very small handful of those. And again, because of that globally distributed surface, we're able to absorb tens of terabits of traffic. So if we look at Amazon CloudFront, some of the benefits that you get from it are things like inline inspection. You get protection from SYN floods, and also other types of attacks. For Route 53, we can do DNS header validations. We can look at sort of known good and bad resolvers. So we have ways where we kind of validate a baseline of, hey, what are the known good resolvers that are out there? And so when we see a DDoS attack come in, we can do some shaping based on the fact that, hey, this is a resolver that we know to send good traffic on a regular basis. And so again, many mitigations that are available across both of these, but the central message is a very large surface for ingesting attacks with mitigation out there at those edge locations. The next thing that you can do to help build a highly scalable application is to configure elastic load balancer in front of your application and use that to basically scale and help you to mitigate an attack through that ability to scale up. And ELB can provide sort of additional capabilities besides simple scaling, such as passing on only well-formed connections. So the third thing that you can do here is to prepare yourself to scale, in order to maintain availability by scaling on the compute side. And so for that, you can do scaling you can configure scaling for individual instances. You can also set up auto scaling for your environment and adjust essentially, your resources so that they will automatically grow or scale in response to load. And in this case, it's possible to go from just a few servers to hundreds of servers in the space of only a few minutes. Again, I'll remind you that a benefit of Shield Advanced here, though, is that if you do these types of scaling configurations, and you ever do have your usage spike as a consequence, that's sort of an expense that you would not have to pay. And so that's the point here, which is again that Shield will protect you from that increased expense. So the next area that I think is worth investigating is we talked about making your application scalable. Let's talk about making it secure. One of the best practices that you can do is to make sure that you're configuring security groups and network ACLs on your VPCs in order to, I guess, effectively hide your instances from the internet, or at least hide those portions of your instances that you don't want to expose. So, only the right instances are available, only the right ports on those instances, only the right protocols. And you can use AWS Lambda to essentially automate some of these protections. So in response to, you can parse logs coming off of your application to identify certain threats. And then with AWS Lambda, you can go back in and use the APIs to update your security groups and network ACLs. So you can kind of use all of these things together to dynamically respond in the event of an attack. So the next thing you want is to have your application be well monitored so that you have visibility into DDoS attacks and can respond to them appropriately. So one part of building a well-monitored application is to use CloudWatch. CloudWatch, of course, you can set metrics on almost all AWS services. So you can determine the metrics that matter to you the most, the ones that best indicate application health. And then you can create dashboards and events and custom views that help you to monitor. And lastly, you can integrate CloudWatch with external services like PagerDuty or Slack, so that if that's where you choose to live in terms of monitoring your applications and having visibility, then that's where you will see these events. And in fact, we'll see a demo of that a little later. The next thing you can do to help your application be well monitored is to enable service logs to give you this capability of doing deeper analysis. So this can include things like VPC flow logs, which you could pump into repositories like S3, or you could run them through a service like Kinesis, or you could analyze them with something like Amazon Redshift. And again, this can be really helpful for troubleshooting connectivity or security issues, and really help you get that deeper level of insight into what's happening either during or after an attack. The next thing that you can do as far as building a well-monitored application is also just to enable AWS Waffe to kind of baseline or collect data on your layer 7 traffic. So with Waffe, it's possible to create what we call a web ACL that would normally have rules for allowing or rejecting requests. But you can also just turn on Waffe in sort of purely account mode with no rules in place, but that will trigger the collection of request data and of log samples and all those sorts of things. So even if you aren't blocking anything yet, you can still use AWS Waffe to help you get a baseline. And also, if you have Waffe pre-configured for that resource, it can make it easier for you to quickly respond if an attack does occur. But, and with AWS Waffe, you have the capability when you do want to block traffic of using rules that span things like URLs, geo conditions. You can create rate-based rules. There's many things that you can do, which we'll see in the topics in the sessions later today. And then another part of building a well-monitored application is enabling Shield Advanced. Again, that gives you sort of this lower threshold of layer 7 detection, layer 7 attack detection against your resources, and also layer 3-4 detection. And it makes all those attacks visible in the console or in CloudWatch metrics. So we've made our application scalable, we've made it secure, we've made it well monitored. There's still a little bit more that we can do to protect it from DDoS. And this comes back again to sort of another recommendation around using AWS Waffe. Importantly, Waffe can help you very quickly block layer 7 attacks. And it provides a number of ways to do this. So the first is that it has a very flexible rules language that comes with, and then we also have security automations that you can use to sort of run and enable quite a number of protections just right out of the box. We'll also hear about the managed protections for AWS Waffe that were added last year. In our final session of the day, you'll get to see Trend Micro talk about their managed rule set on AWS Waffe and how you can enable that. Another benefit of Waffe is that in the event of an attack, rule propagation is very fast. So if you have identified an attack signature, you can put a Waffe rule in place, and it will synchronize globally in less than a minute. In most cases, it will be on a matter of seconds. And all of this can be managed via SelfService APIs. So again, you can do some of these integrations that make it possible to, if you detect an attack, get a signature on it, you can programmatically put a rule in place to block that attack. And again, we've added managed rules that are available from the AWS Marketplace. These were introduced late last year in about November of 2017. And these rule sets are available from a large number of Waffe partners. And again, you'll see details on this a little bit later. And then kind of the 10th best practice that we would recommend is to use AWS Shield not just for the monitoring benefits of it, but really to give you the enhanced protection of your applications against those very largest network attacks. So Shield Advanced gives you, advanced mitigations against things like SYN floods. We also can bring to bear some additional traffic engineering types of techniques to protect your applications, particularly those running in regions that can't be fronted by a CDN like CloudFront. Shield Advanced, again, gives you access 24/7 to our DDoS response team, who are able to engage with you on kind of the most complex cases and ensure that your applications stay available. Also, they can work with you in the case of a layer 7 attack to help put Waffe mitigations in place. And they will engage with you not just reactively during an attack, but proactively. So before an attack, if you want help, again, assessing your architecture, if you want help looking at your overall DDoS posture, of reviewing attacks that we've seen over the past several months against your resources, the DDoS response team can help you with that. Also, Shield Advanced helps protect not just the availability of your applications, but it also enhances the AWS SLAs for protected services. So some AWS services will say that they have an SLA that's maybe 4 nines, 99.99% available, and then there will be a clause that says unless you're under DDoS attack. In the case of Shield Advanced, if you have subscribed to Shield Advanced, then that effectively that clause is erased from those SLAs, and we guarantee the availability of your application at that original level, even when you're under DDoS attack. And then, importantly, AWS Waffe is included with Shield Advanced at no additional charge for any resources that you've protected with Shield Advanced. And there are some customers who find that actually the difference in cost between using Waffe alone for their applications versus using Shield Advanced and using Waffe bundled with that's actually a fairly small delta. And so there are many customers who choose to say, well, let me enable Shield Advanced so I get both of those protections. And then importantly, another area where Shield Advanced can help you control costs is in this area of the cost protection. So, again, if you have to scale in response to an attack, being able to effectively erase that off of your bill. So we've covered, again, 10 different best practices for DDoS resiliency. Many of these are things that you can do as a customer of AWS without subscribing to additional services like Waffe and Shield. At the same time, I hope that I've given you some insight into why those two services might be particularly valuable. The good news is you don't need to remember all 10 of those. We've encapsulated them in a white paper, and you can find it at this URL, but you also don't have to remember that. If you just go online and you search for AWS DDoS best practices, it will be the first link that comes up. And you can drill through. It's a PDF document. We refresh it about every year and a half as AWS releases new services and the threat environment changes and so forth. And so you can watch. This one was published in the current version in late 2016. We're expecting to release an update to it in the coming months. But the information in there is pretty current and will really help walk you through these protections. So with that, I'm going to jump across to a demo. And in this demo, what I want to show is first how easy it is to enable protections in AWS Shield Advanced, and then also how easy it is to integrate external services like PagerDuty and Slack to give you visibility into attacks when they occur. So for this, I've chosen to just do a recorded demo. And I'll just kind of walk you through this. So first, we're going to go to, in the AWS console, to the Waffe and Shield console. And here what we want to do is add protections for a new resource. And in this case, we're going to say we want to protect a CloudFront distribution. And this is literally how easy it is in Shield Advanced to enable advanced protections to a resource. You just simply select it and say, add the protection. Now we're going to jump over to simple notification service. And we're going to create a topic. And in this case, we're just going to give it a demo name. Now the purpose of this SNS topic, it's going to be the glue ultimately between AWS and the external services like PagerDuty or Slack. So we've created this new SNS topic. And now we're going to jump over to PagerDuty. And in PagerDuty, you can see that we have a number of services that are available. And one of them is a Amazon CloudWatch integration. And when we click through this on PagerDuty, PagerDuty says, hey, here's an integration URL. This is what you should use for sending webhooks into PagerDuty. So we're going to take this URL and copy it and come back over to Simple Notification Service. And we're going to create a subscription to that topic using that endpoint provided by PagerDuty. And then here I think we're just going to refresh so that we can see that that has taken effect. And so there is our subscription to this SNS topic. So now in PagerDuty, we're going to go back to the integrations. And what we'll see is there's a new integration available, this Amazon CloudWatch integration. And there's also a number of extensions that are available in PagerDuty. In this case, we have the Slack extension. And so we're going to kind of get these hooked together. Now we'll jump back over to the AWS console, and we'll go into CloudWatch. Now we've enabled Shield Advanced protections on a CloudFront distribution. So in CloudWatch, we're going to have the ability to create an alarm on metrics that are produced for that CloudFront distribution as a result of it being subscribed or protected by Shield Advanced. So you can see that there are 48 metrics in this account available related to DDoS protection. In this case, we're going to choose the DDoS detected metric for our protected distribution. And this is a very simple metric. Basically, it's got a value of 1 if you're under attack. It's got a value of 0 if there is no detected attack on that resource. And so we're just setting this alarm threshold to say, hey, if the value of this metric is greater than or equal to 1, in this case for one successive period, then we're going to alarm. And what we're going to do is we're going to send a notification to that SNS topic that we created earlier. So we have now created this CloudWatch alarm. And I believe at this point we paused for a little while because what's going on is there's an attack brewing. So behind the scenes, we're actually injecting or simulating an attack against that CloudFront distribution. And that takes just a moment to do off screen. And so now we're going to go back to the Waffe and Shield console. And you can see that we have an incident. There's that little notification says, hey, there's an attack incident. And there it is listed. So we have one current attack that's ongoing. We also had some historical attacks. Now we've just shifted back to kind of the top level dashboard view, and you can see that the attack was highlighted there as well. Clicking on it brings us back to the same place. So we've now had an attack. We can click through on that attack to look at a few details of it. So this is, we've clicked through into CloudWatch, and we can see that I think the vertical axis there is in gigabits per second. So it's a small attack. In this case, it's been simulated about 3 gigabits per second. And that attack is ongoing. And then we'll let it refresh here for a moment. So now we're going to go back over to the CloudWatch alarms. And we see that an alarm was issued for that event. This is the alarm that we configured where we said, hey, if the value of that under attack metric exceeds 1, then fire an alarm. Now we jump over to PagerDuty, and sure enough, because it was subscribed to the SNS topic for that event, we have triggered an event in PagerDuty, and PagerDuty, by virtue of that integration that we saw with Slack, is now in the Slack channel given you a notification that, hey, AWS has detected a DDoS attack against one of your protected resources. And in this case, it was set up so that you could click the resolve button. So at least from a PagerDuty standpoint, that's considered resolved. And then in PagerDuty, I think if we refresh that page now, you'll see that because you resolved it in Slack, it shows as resolved. So I believe that's the end of the demo here. And so hopefully what you've seen is how easy it is to connect all this together. So first of all, to enable enhanced Shield Advanced protection on a CloudFront distribution, it was a matter of just a few clicks. It only took a few more clicks from there to say I want to create an SNS topic and then point a CloudWatch metric of is an attack detected against this resource at that SNS topic, to then hook that up using a webhook from PagerDuty so that you could get notified. And then PagerDuty, of course, has integration with things like Slack. And now you can see that right there in the channel, in the Slack channel where you live and work every day. And of course, there are many other integrations possible. This is just one common example. But again, just shows how easy it is to put all this together to give you a much higher level of visibility into what's happening with DDoS attacks against your application. So with that, I wanted to say thank you, but also we have time. We have about 10 minutes for questions. So I'm happy to take those, and then from there we'll go into a break. So yes?
Very quick one. CloudFront, does that protect us automatically against the memcache attack?
Oh, yes. Thank you for asking. So the memcache attacks, oh, sure. The question was, if we're subscribed to CloudFront, does that include protections against the memcache attacks? And the answer to that is yes. When we saw those attacks coming, we already had mitigations and shapers and things that were doing a very effective job at mitigating those attacks. Once we got a better sense of exactly, when, where, and how they were occurring, we added some additional mitigations. Yeah, all customers of AWS should be well protected against the memcache attacks, particularly if you're using CloudFront, one of these services that allows us, the global services that allows us to absorb that traffic over a very large, ingestion area. Yes? So the question was, how do our rule sets compare to rule sets that are available, I think, from yeah. Right. Right. So I would say that the advantages, again, the question was, how do these rule sets compare to, our Waffe rule sets compare to other rule sets that are available? And the answer to that is a couple of things. So one is that first, these rule sets are provided by, I think, some of the most trusted names in web application security. And I'll let Sundar rather cover who those vendors are. But Trend Micro is just one example, who's here today. The other thing is that these rule sets are constantly updated. So you don't sort of pay for a static rule set and then have to resubscribe when the new threats are detected. Our partner vendors are constantly updating those rule sets and maintaining them. And they cover a broad range of threats too. So there's some that are focused on things like SQL injection, some that are focused on OWASP top 10 type threats, some on kind of virtual patching for CVEs. So they really just cover a very wide area. So, I'm sorry, I think he had a question. Yeah.
So with Shield Advanced, do we pay for rules that we set up in that, or are they rated as well?
Yeah, so the question is, for Shield Advanced, do you pay for the rules that you set up in AWS Waffe, or how does that work? So the answer to that is, with AWS Waffe, you can create custom rules. So those are just ones that you put together based on what you know about your application or particular signatures that you've detected. There are also some security automations we've created, so you can enable certain rule sets through things like CloudFormation scripts. For those, there would be no additional charge whatsoever. If you chose to use a vendor-supplied rule set, like the Trend Micro, one of the Trend Micro rule sets, you would not pay any of the normal Waffe request charges associated with any requests that were processed through those. But you would pay the additional amount that say, Trend Micro would charge for use of their rule set. So there would be an incremental charge for using their value-added kind of rule set on top of Waffe. But for the basic Waffe usage itself, for the web apple, for the rules, for the normal request processing, there would be no additional charge.
I was wondering comments on how Waffe can use the API gateway.
Sure.
And also regional endpoints as well.
Right. So the question is, good. We're getting into lots of good Waffe questions. So Sundar won't have anything to talk about, but that's good. No. So the question was, how can you? Sorry, now I'm spacing out on the question. Just mention it real quick again. Oh yes, using Waffe with API gateway. So today you have an option to use Waffe with API gateway. But the way that you need to do that is in API Gateway, you have the option of saying, I want it to be edge enhanced or not edge enhanced. If you say that you want it edge enhanced, what effectively happens behind the scenes is there is a CloudFront distribution that's created and used for that. Now, you can't attach WAF to that CloudFront distribution because it's not in your account. So your option, if you want to do that today, is to instead make it a regional API gateway endpoint, and then create a CloudFront distribution and put in front of that endpoint, and then enable WAF on that CloudFront distribution. So you can do that today. And so that is also something that we're looking at to give customers a little bit more flexibility on that front. But yes, you absolutely can use WAF with API Gateway today via that path. And I think we're actually at time. I'll just bring back the agenda briefly. We have about 15 minutes to take a break, and then we'll come back, and Sundar will talk to us about advanced techniques for securing your web applications, when we'll really focus on WAF in this session. So again, thank you, and we'll see you in 15 minutes.